Today, I want to talk about something that doesn't always look spiritual, but it affects almost everyone: comparison. Not just scrolling and noticing what someone else has, but that deeper feeling where you start to question your own life, your timing, your direction, even your identity. And what's interesting is comparison doesn't just show up when you're insecure. It often shows up when you're unclear. Because when you don't fully understand what God is building in your life, everything else starts to look like an option. And suddenly, you're not just observing someone else's life. You're measuring your life against it. So today we're going to slow down again, and we're going to look at comparison, not just as a mindset issue, but as a misalignment issue. Because what if the real problem isn't what you're seeing, but what you've lost sight of? Let's get into it. Comparison feels real because it attaches itself to things that matter to you. Your purpose, your success, your growth, your calling. It doesn't usually show up in areas that you don't care about. It shows up in the areas where you're asking questions. And for a lot of people, those questions are loud. Am I where I'm supposed to be? Am I behind? Did I miss something? Why does their life look so clear? Mine doesn't. And what makes it even more confusing is you can be following God, you can be walking with God, and sometimes you can still feel this way. You can be praying, seeking Him, trying to be obedient, and still look at someone else's life and think, why does it look like this? Why does it look like it's working for them, but not for me? But that question in itself reveals something way deeper. It reveals somewhere along the way, you stopped looking at your life through God's design and started looking at it through visible outcomes. Scripture does not support comparison. It supports assignments. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 4, it says, each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else. That's important, because it doesn't say try not to compare. It redirects your focus completely. It tests your work. Look at your life. Carry your own assignment. Then, in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it talks about the body, how every part has a different function. The hand isn't the foot, the eye isn't the ear, and none of them are supposed to be. But imagine if they were comparing. The hand trying to function like the foot, the eye trying to hear like the ear. It wouldn't just be frustrating, it would be dysfunctional. And that's exactly what comparison does. It pulls you out of the function that you're supposed to be in and into confusion. So let's go deeper. Comparison is not just insecurity. It's blueprint misalignment. Because if you truly understood what God designed you for, you wouldn't feel pulled into what everyone else is doing and everything that you see. Think about a blueprint. It has specific measurements, specific structures, and intention. It doesn't change because another blueprint looks different or, oh, I like that building. But when you don't know your blueprint, everything looks like it could be something you could be. It creates pressure because now you're not just living your life, you're evaluating your life constantly. Should I be doing that? Should I look like this? Should I be further along than I am? Ay. And slowly, your life stops being something. It stops being what God designed it to be. Comparison does three things. It distorts your perception. It highlights what others have and minimizes what God is actually doing in you. It creates false urgency. It makes you feel like you're behind, even when you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Number 3, it disconnects you from your process. Instead of leaning into what God is building, you start trying to replicate everything that you see. You're not a replica, you're unique. And that's dangerous Because God is not building copies. He's building individual designs. So what does this look like practically? It means that when you feel comparison rising up in you, you don't just rebuke it and move on. You ask a better question. God, what have you actually designed for me? Because comparison loses its power when clarity increases. It also means you start honoring your season, your phase, even if it looks slower, even if it looks different, even if no one else understands it. Just because something is visible doesn't mean it's aligned. And just because something is hidden doesn't mean it's behind. God does some of his deepest work in the seasons that don't look impressive. It's true. And when you understand your life as something God is building, comparison starts to feel out of place. Because now you're not asking, why don't I have what they have? You're asking, does that even fit what God is building in me? And that question changes everything. Because now you're pulled by what God has for you, not by everything else. You're anchored in what God said. You don't need to become more like someone else. You need to become more aligned with what God designed you to be. That's all that matters. And the moment that you start seeing your life that way, comparison doesn't just get quieter. It starts to lose its voice completely. And that's what we want, right? I don't know, that's what I want. And maybe it's just something that you have to come back to this week. Not in a heavy way, but in an honest way. To pay attention to where comparison right now is showing up in your life. Because it usually reveals something. Not about what you're lacking, but about where you've lost sight of what God is doing. And instead of letting that pull you into pressure, let it redirect you into clarity. Ask God again, what have you actually designed me for? Now, what looks good, not what's working for someone else, but what fits your life. Because you don't need to chase someone else's outcome when your life is already built with such intention. Stay grounded in that. And I'll meet you back here in the next episode.